website looks fine on my laptop. I don't need to worry about mobile optimization. That is absolutely not true, and I'm going to talk you through why that is.
Hello and welcome to Engage and Thrive, also known as EAT, your coffee catch-up with me, your host, Taelon, where we will go through common problems and hurdles that come up in business, marketing and advertising and try and demystify them. I know firsthand how complicated and confusing it can seem with all the different acronyms and all the things to do in business. So let me try and help you be better in business. First things first, let's start with grabbing a coffee.
First thing to clarify, when I'm talking about mobile optimization, I mean viewing a website in a browser. So if it's Chrome or Safari or Firefox, whatever you're using on your phone, so it's not an app. So not something that you've downloaded from the App Store that you have native built in on your phone. The next thing to think about is, as a huge statistic that people talk about, as it stands right now, 60% of all internet users are coming from mobile. Now, this really does depend on your service, your product, your geographical target, your demographic and everything. But if you just think about that 60% of all internet users are mobile. That's just massive. And there's another kind of stat that floats around as well, that they're saying that if you don't have that 1 second optimized on your site, you can lose 7% of traffic. So if you think about how long it takes to load up your website, which we'll go into further in a minute, but just 1 second can cost you 7% of your traffic. The other thing to think about is your own behavior. So I think I've referred to this before about big internet and little internet, and this can massively depend on your age as well. So I really might be showing my age here, but there are certain tasks that I will always do on little internet, which is on my phone. And there's other tasks that I save for big internet. So things like booking flights is something that's deep inside me, just has to do that on big internet. But browsing for flights, saving flights, doing research about that destination, anything around where we're going to go, what we're going to do, Google Maps, reviews, saving content places, that's all done on a phone. That's all done on mobile, on little internet. So the other thing to cover off is there are old hack tricks that people used to talk about when they're talking about mobile websites, and those dirty tricks from old days, not judging anyone's homework, just don't apply nowadays. So a long time ago, people used to make a desktop version of a website and a mobile website, two different websites, just for clarification, not optimized, actually two different websites, completely different content, two different places needing to be updated. That's not a good experience nowadays. And again, I'll go into this further in takeaways. Now to cover off vocab. So the first thing is responsive design. So how does your design feel, look, do on different mobiles? What does it look like on different size mobiles? And also, just to confirm, when we're talking about mobiles, right? I use an iPhone 15 Pro Max, so my screen's massive. But then someone else might be using an iPhone 6. Your website needs to feel and be a responsive design to both those size phones. The next one is mobile first indexing. So this is actually something that Google had been working on for years and officially finished it, I believe, the beginning of this year, which basically means if your website is built for a mobile first experience, aka it's a good experience on mobile, it'll actually rank better in SEO terms. And again, we'll cover this off in takeaways. The other thing is mobile first design. Again, you'll hear people talk about that. It kind of goes hand in hand with responsive design. So how does your website look mobile first? So designing your website and experience on mobile and then thinking about desktop. The next one is UX. So again, user experience. We've covered this previously. I'm fully aware that it's not UE. And this is how does it feel for a person going on your website, exploring, clicking around as their experience on mobile. To give you an example, one thing that is a bugbear is if I'm scrolling on a website and they haven't moved the buttons, or there's certain things that are like autoplay. So if you're on a website and you have an autoplay video, especially on mobile, that can be really frustrating because you might be scrolling and you can hear a noise coming out, but you don't know where it's coming from. The same with if you're scrolling and the buttons aren't optimized on mobile and you end up clicking on things because it's designed for desktop and not for this scrolling. So if you think about as well gestures that we all do with mobile stuff, so we touch, we zoom, the pinch to zoom, we might swipe. Again, those are all things that are user experience on mobile. The next thing to think about, and people talk about in terms of vocab, is load time. So how long does it take for your website to load on mobile? Again, this can be down to your 3G connection, 4G connection, 5G connection, Wi-Fi, etc. But there are tools and resources, which I will link in the show notes, which will give you actually what your load time is, your speed. So there's a thing called Google Page Speed, where you can put in your URL and it will tell you what is your load time. So it doesn't matter about you checking it on your 5G or your Wi-Fi. And again, this will be impacted by several different things like your servers, etc., which we can go into more technical on the SEO side. Another thing that people talk about is the viewport. So especially if you're working with a developer and they are trying to optimize for mobile and you're doing testing, they would then ask you what's your viewport. So it literally means the size of the screen that you're testing from. And again, there's a URL that you can use that it can tell you that. I'll link it in the show notes. But if I'm testing it from my iPhone 15 Pro Max and you're testing it from an iPhone 6, we've got different screen sizes, and a developer would need to know that to kind of replicate the experience you've got to optimize it or find a bug, etc. Today, we're actually going to go through 2 key takeaways, because really I could actually just group this into one. There's things to really consider when you're talking about mobile optimization. It's not a fad. And like I said, if you think of that statistic of 60% of internet users are mobile users, it still blows my mind. It's just crazy. But actually, if you think about the world and different regions, and like I said, our own user behavior, that makes sense. So number one, the first thing to think about is the quality of user experience. So like I was talking about with your gestures, your swipe, your zoom, etc., you also need to think about how things are like floating in. When you're scrolling down, what are you seeing? And like your brand, how is your brand reflected on mobile? I think a lot of times that can be quite difficult to interpret, because on a desktop you have like a bigger space to showcase. So if I was thinking about my branding from a color palette perspective, I want like really dark black with a bit of white writing, but actually on mobile that might not be a good experience. Or if I have to think about people having the different system preferences, so that when you have like the white system preferences or the dark system preferences, depending on time of day or what your preferred experience is, how does that feel? And then like an accessibility point. So again, with mobile and having the different screen sizes, what does that look like? What does that feel like? Then to think about when I'm talking about things moving across the screen and all that, it's your content. So I mentioned earlier that there's an old hack trick of people having 2 different websites, one for desktop, one for mobile, which is bad. What you can consider and think about is what type of content you want to show on mobile versus on desktop. So for example, when I was talking about, again, the annoying video that auto loads, you may decide that your video doesn't show on mobile. And depending on what platform you're using to build your website, and you would have to align with your developer, or you may understand it if you're building it yourself, these different capabilities that you have. All of these kind of feed into that quality user experience. And as a user, it really makes me think like, you've thought about my experience on mobile. Like, I get it. I think the thing that is the worst is when a mobile experience is so stripped back that you're forced to go on desktop. And that's something we don't want to do. We don't want to force people to have an experience on the big internet, on the desktop. We want to give them enough that they can still buy in, and they're still getting the full experience of our brand, of our tone, of our values, and that they buy, right? Because that's the be all and end all. Which kind of leads into number 2. That user experience, and what I'm talking about is like the front end part of your website. So how it looks to an outside, how they experience it, like the makeup on the front side of a website. The other part to think about with mobile optimization that's really important, I think not many people necessarily consider or realize the impact, is the impact to SEO. Depending on how long your website takes to load, that can impact your ranking, how Google sees your website, your mobile experience, what it believes your website is about. If your user experience is not good, it may not be indexed as a mobile first website by Google. Again, that can help with your ranking in search when it comes up on Google. The other thing to think about is Mobile keywords. This sounds so weird, right? But again, going back to that thought around big internet and small internet, when you're on desktop, you typically type in longer phrases. They call it like longer tail keywords. Whereas on mobile, you kind of do shorter phrases, shorter keywords, maybe more acronyms, maybe something you've heard, something that's trending. And that's different keywords to the desktop experience. So again, using that as part of your research, as part of your experience, as part of your content, you really need to keep that in mind the whole time. And obviously with user experience and SEO and keywords and everything, the one thing to bear in mind is who is your target audience? Who are you trying to target? So I would say you need to cross-reference with your Google Analytics traffic to see where it's coming from, desktop or mobile users, and you can go into further detail about different browser types, Chrome, Firefox, etc., and the different actually mobile phone sizes. And then also cross-reference with Google Search Console. Again, I will link these in the show notes as resources. But have a look at that information when you're kind of prioritizing around your mobile optimization. So as a bonus piece, just to remember and as a recap, is mobile optimization isn't a fad. It is a real thing, and there are more things to do for mobile optimization than you may realize. But just remember, keep aligned to your target audience, measure anything you're doing, track it, see what happens, and as it's online, you can keep iterating and updating. But thank you for joining me for another episode of Engage and Thrive, and see you next week.